The last 2 hours, we've heard from first responders who were on the front lines a week ago. We've heard from the governor and also Broward County School Superintendent Runcie. And now we're hearing from lawmakers. We know the House and Senate have recently convened. They are planning to lay out a comprehensive package to school safety and security.
All right, here's Senator Joe Negron
to make sure that
now
our schools are as safe as they can be. And I want to thank this President-designate Senator Galvano for his work on this issue. I also want to thank our Rules Chair, Senator Benaquisto. We've had significant input from a number of senators, from our Majority Leader, Senator Simpson, from the Democratic Leader, Senator Brannan. And I believe that the proposal that you will hear us describe today, which we will present to the Senate for their consideration, will take measurable, concrete steps to doing what we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
First, I'd just like to say that I think in all moments of crisis, it's an opportunity to go out there and lead and do great things, or you can continue to spin down a chasm of empty rhetoric and do nothing. What we know is we have experienced an unspeakable tragedy. Our emotions are heartfelt, absolutely beside ourselves with the loss and the unnecessary aspects of the tragedy have affected us all. And so our job is to lead. Government has failed on multiple levels. It can never happen again. And our hope is that we will put together jointly with the Senate a proposal that will ensure it never happens again and we don't fail our school students again. And that we can do the number one thing that we are here and exist for, and that is to protect our people and keep them safe. I'd like to give great applause to Chairman Oliva, President-designate Galvano, Senator Benaquisto, and Chairman Sprowls for all their hard work. We've dug into this issue on multiple levels with always the one phrase in our mind, never again. And I think we've gotten to a product that gets us there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Speaker. I'm going to run through some of the components of the legislation that the Senate and House have been working on together since this tragedy occurred last week, and I'd like to specifically thank the Speaker-designate, Jose Oliva, for the collaborative effort that we have had working together to address this issue in the most comprehensive of manners, as well as all the other members in both chambers who have come together to help us establish a meaningful, working plan that will make a difference in the years to come. The first component is firearm safety. We will, through legislation in the various chambers, establish new restrictions on purchase and ownership of firearms, and that is all types of firearms. We will increase the minimum age for purchasing a firearm to 21 years, except for persons in law enforcement and active military personnel. We will establish a 3-day waiting period for purchase of all firearms, except for concealed weapon permit holders or persons who complete the 16-hour hunter safety course approved by the Fish and Wildlife Commission. This also provides time for additional criminal history checks. The third component in firearm safety is a complete ban of the bump stocks. Secondly, in terms of major silos, it is the goal of both chambers through their legislation to enhance restrictions for persons subject to involuntary examination and commitment, in other words, the Baker Act. We hope to provide law enforcement and the court with the tools to enhance public safety by temporarily restricting firearm possession for those who would come into those types of processes. Also, prohibition on a person adjudicated mentally defective or committed to a mental institution from owning or purchasing a firearm or obtaining concealed weapon license. Current law prohibits purchase, but does not prohibit the possession, and that is a change. With regard to school safety, it is the goal of the legislature to improve school security capabilities through additional school resource and security officers, to harden our schools, and to incorporate into the school system programs to enhance safety and security through the use of specifically thoroughly trained and screened school personnel to function as part of school security teams under the auspices of law enforcement. Establish safe school and security standards and review school safety and security plans, implementation of a risk assessment procedure, in addition, requiring training for school safety specialists as well as students and faculty, which would also incorporate the requirement for drills for active shooter and hostage situations involving students, school personnel, and law enforcement experts. The next silo would be to improve response to students presenting a danger to themselves or others. That would be accomplished by codifying and enhancing the activities of the multi-agency network for students with emotional and behavioral disabilities, requiring each school district to designate a school safety specialist and each school to establish a threat assessment team to provide a coordinated approach to evaluating and responding to students who pose a threat. In addition, removing barriers that prevent schools, districts, and law enforcement to appropriately communicate and confer regarding students who are a threat and that prevent the appropriate actions to take place to have mental health services available and to have the appropriate coordination with law enforcement. The next silo would be coordinating information sharing and other system improvements. In this silo, we have creating an affirmative obligation for personnel in schools, law enforcement, and service agencies to communicate and work together when serving the same at-risk youth. So there will not be a hiatus in the services being provided and instead coordination. Establishment of a statewide commission to investigate system failures in the Parkland school shooting and prior mass shooting events and make recommendations for system improvements. It will analyze evidence from the Parkland shooting and other mass shooting events in Florida, in other words, to determine the extent to which failures in communication, failures in coordination, and other failures contributed to an inability to prevent the deaths and injuries. Also to identify available tools such as a fusion center or a clearinghouse or judicial inquiry system, and recommend ways that resources can be used more efficiently and effectively to identify risk and threats. Recommend changes to procedures or policies necessary to enhance communications among schools, law enforcement, and social service agencies as well. With regard to mental health, both chambers are aggressively seeking to increase funding for mental health training, screening, counseling, and services in schools. And finally, we will revisit the public records law to create some exemptions for videos, photos, and addresses of victims, especially minors that are involved in situations like this. Again, I look forward to working with both chambers and Speaker-designate Oliva to move these bills forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to also thank everyone that has worked on this. As you know, this has been a very brief period of time, and this is a very comprehensive piece of legislation. I want to thank the President-designate Galvano and the President of the Senate and their entire leadership team for how cooperatively they've worked with us. I want to thank our speaker for his leadership. Special thanks to Chairman Sprouse. His prosecutorial experience has been indispensable in understanding how proposed laws actually apply in the real world, and I want to thank him for that. It's great to also have had the support of Leader Rodriguez, Chairman Metz, and of course Representative Moritas, who is a Broward County representative, along with countless others. This has truly been bipartisan, if not entirely. There have certainly been people like Representative Moskowitz, who represents that district, who has been involved in the entire process, Representative Jacobs, Representative Edwards Walpole, and of course on the Senate, there have been people like Senator Book. The next week and a half will be interesting in that there will be a tremendous amount of politics surrounding this issue. There will be those that will seek to win political points on what is a highly, highly emotive issue. The way that we are all approaching it, and the reason that it's been so easy to collaborate, is that we very early on made the conclusion that what we have to do is understand what can we really say, item by item, that would have prevented this tragedy from happening. As you can see here behind us, there's a list of the many failings that occurred. And so the proposal that we will put forward will speak directly to every single failing that happened, so that we can walk away here knowing we changed this piece that failed, we changed this piece that failed, so on and so forth, so that we can truly say that if what we want is to know that we've ensured that this doesn't happen again, we've brought forth the legislation to do it. There will be obviously a lot of emotion and a lot of rhetoric, but that will be the focus of those that have made a strong bipartisan commitment to ensure that this does not happen again in our state. Thank you.
I too want to thank the entire leadership of the Florida House and the Florida Senate for moving forward in such an aggressive and efficient way to make sure we make an impact quickly. I'll add two things. As we look back on all of the failures of law enforcement and social service providers to heed the warnings, to talk with their partners in the community, there is one simple ask now, and they can do it before we take any additional action. Look back over your call logs and the tips that you've gotten in the community, both for law enforcement and social services providers. See if there is another person like this out there, that warnings have been given and tips have been called in, and if there's a way to prevent and coordinate in the local community, we ask that they do that now and waste no time to look back at what has been given to them in terms of information. And the last thing I'll share is this. To every student at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, those who came up to Tallahassee to advocate, and those who, for whatever reason, could not, your courage, your strength, your advocacy has made a difference. We are grateful for their participation. We hope that they join us on this journey as we seek change and work hard to make schools safer. But we all want them to know, and their families to know, that we are grateful for their input, and we are thankful for them, and we admire them very much. Thank you.
We're happy to answer a few questions, and specifics on the bill will defer to the bill sponsors and those with those responsibilities.
Does this include teachers being armed, with the possibility of being armed?
No, what it includes is the most robust, first of its kind, of any of the 50 states system, where we say if you are a licensed law enforcement officer who has been trained and has the credential hours to be a law enforcement officer, and you're a certified teacher, yes, that person who's duly hired as a teacher from the superintendent, as a law enforcement officer from the sheriff, yes, they can carry guns as a school resource officer can in the school system. It's the first of its kind, and it is absolutely in my opinion, the game changer in this legislation.
But they would have to be a law officer as
That's
well
correct.
as a
They
teacher?
have to have the requisite number of hours to be a licensed law enforcement officer.
Representative Oliva, if you could please clear that up in Spanish for Telemundo, since we talked about it yesterday. That's a very important point.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
She was talking to me.
I'd love to see the speaker.
I haven't had that one before.
Con respecto a la parte de la legislación que habla sobre los maestros que quizás puedan estar armados dentro de la aula, lo que la legislación va a proponer es que para poder estar armado, primeramente, el sistema escolar local tiene que tomar la decisión de querer estar en ese programa. Segundo, las autoridades legales locales también tienen que estar de acuerdo. Pero por último y más importante, esa persona tiene que ser una persona con todos los credenciales que tiene un policía y también tener los credenciales de ser un maestro. Es decir, no es simplemente que vamos a armar a un maestro, sino que vamos a dejar que una persona con los credenciales de ser un policía y los credenciales de ser un maestro, hacer los dos en el aula.
If I could just add one response to that question. In the Senate proposal, it's a voluntary program, and it would be up to each individual school district to decide to the extent that they wanted to participate, and obviously it would be up to individual teachers to decide if they wanted to participate. We certainly hope that our school districts would take advantage of all of these opportunities to enhance safety, but it is a voluntary program.
There are many students from Parkland who have said that they wanted to see an overall ban on these certain types of firearms. What you guys are proposing obviously doesn't address that. So what do you say to those students?
Well, as I mentioned yesterday in our visit, I think that there's a delicate balance, and even in difficult times, we have to follow the Constitution. We have to show fidelity to the Constitution. It's my view that a proposal that would have outlawed a particular type of weapon would fall into the area of being an unconstitutional taking from law-abiding citizens and wouldn't directly address the underlying causes. So I believe that the gun safety issues that are addressed and I expect to be addressed in both of these bills are limited in scope but still very significant. And I also think that they keep our pledge to follow the Constitution.
Senator Galvano, please. A question about the waiting period, sir. Why is a 3-day waiting period important? When would the 3-day waiting period begin, and how much opposition do you expect to this idea?
Well, what we have done in this legislation is to look at where we are with handguns, for example, and move those restrictions into the realm of all firearms. And in some ways, it's a question statutorily of just deleting the word handgun and putting in firearm. The 3-day waiting period is oftentimes referred to as a cooling off period or an opportunity for someone to rethink. But more importantly, a background check will take place during that period as well. And that's something that we believe is appropriate to occur with regard to the purchase of all firearms at this point, so that adequate background check can take place and any other things that need to be readjusted during that period. I'm sure there's going to be opposition to different components of this bill. Actually, that's not been a focus of the Senate and my discussions with Speaker-designate Oliva. This is a matter of focusing on what we need to do, what is appropriate, and what's best for the victims and the families.
Besides the fact that you weren't in session at the time, why wasn't there a legislative response to the Pulse shooting?
I would say that we can't simply, I would say that we can't simply say beside the fact. I think that's a major point of why there wasn't this immediate outpouring, because there wasn't the vehicle. Had a great number of people from the Orlando community wanted to come up to Orlando.
9 months to think about it.
Right.
And do something.
Right, and so I think that there were several different components to that. The least of which was not the tremendous civic outpouring of those children themselves. I mean, for any of us to say that a call to action did not come from the direct participation of those victims and being able to sit with them and hear them would certainly not be honest. But in addition to that, we have to understand these are not identical situations. They both had a sociopath, but one of them was a far greater failure of a system. It was a tremendous failure. And the good news about this will be that while that was not addressed at that time, what is being proposed now addresses any of these events in the future.
Representative, if I could, or Senator Galvano, either one, the governor has proposed a violence restraining order there where weapons could be held for up 60 days or longer. Does your plan also include that? And also a second question, do you also prohibit the possession of a weapon by someone under 21?
With regard to the holding of weapons, we have a component in the bill that works in conjunction with the Baker Act procedure where firearms can be taken into possession of law enforcement, and law enforcement can then seek to hold those weapons for the 60-day period, and even longer if they petition the court to do so. With regard to 21, that is for the purchase of firearms.
Do you believe it would be unconstitutional to outlaw guns that may be possession, or why not go there?
The possession, there is lawful possession by people under 21. Oftentimes you have under parental supervision, or you have training academies, you have ROTC, things of that nature. This is for the purchase of a gun, and we're not infringing on the lawful possession by someone under 21.
If you could go back to the restricted issue, and I understand what you're saying about Baker Act, but Senator Rubio and the governor had both endorsed this idea of allowing family members or law enforcement to go to a judge, and not go through the Baker Act procedure, but just go to a judge and say this person is a danger, and present evidence and say, can you please take away their guns for a temporary period of time. And I know that that was something you all were looking at, and I'm just kind of curious, what made you to reframe your thought on that?
We do have that program as well in the bill that we're looking at, but it follows the Baker Act procedure.
Just let me just add to the comments of Senator Galvano. So we have a very robust proposal that we're working on that would allow law enforcement, after arriving on the scene, make a determination if there is a clear and credible danger to themselves or to someone else. At that point, if that person were to be Baker Acted, those weapons could be temporarily held. During those 72 hours, the Sheriff's Department could petition the court to hold those weapons for an additional 60 days. And even beyond that, they could petition further. If during all of that time, the person were to be suffering from some mental illness, I suppose it would be adjudicated so. And in the event that they would be adjudicated mentally ill, then that person could not hold weapons under any circumstance.
Could you explain what your objection is to allow not having that as part of the Baker Act statute? Why it's so important that it be part of the Baker Act system? Because the governor's proposal, it sounds like, doesn't do that.
Well, I think, and we took a long, hard look at this, and Chairman Sprouse worked extensively on this. Whenever you are going to deprive someone of something, you have to do it under a condition that provides clear evidence that that is necessary. And so, in the way that we've seen it, giving people outside of either the authority or the understanding of what is clear and present danger, a family member, a neighbor, or someone like that, to directly make that appeal, we think goes beyond. But what a neighbor or a family member can do, and by the way, in this case, did repeatedly do, was call law enforcement and say this person is a danger to themselves and to others. At that point, under our law, that person would have been relieved of their weapons. A petition would have been made to the court. Taking the rest of the evidence, he would have been adjudicated mentally ill and would have never held a weapon again.
But it would require a Baker Act determination first, before those weapons are removed.
Yes, that's correct. That would have to be the determination.
This This started off as a bipartisan plan, and Representative Moskowitz had invited House leadership here to Parkland. Are Democrats still involved in this, or have things fissured?
I was on the phone with Representative Moskowitz yesterday for an extended period of time. We've been sharing comments back and forth. He has some very particular detailed comments. He agrees with us that if this is going to be prevented, we have to address the failings that occurred. As of yesterday, as you can imagine, he was particularly concerned with the failure of the resource officer. And so he has some very specific language that we're talking with him in regards to that. We've also been talking with other members. I sat with Representative Jacobs just this morning, and I know that that's going on in the Senate as well.
Does your plan also include the piece relating to allowing opt-in for the school training armed, I know that you said the Senate plan does the House plan as well?
I believe both plans do, and we're referring to it as the school marshal plan. And just 2 points that weren't made earlier on that, I wanted to emphasize that we're talking about persons with a minimum of 132 hours of training, and persons who have gone through extensive criminal background check, mental, psychological evaluations, as well as substance abuse evaluations. And then they go under the auspices of law enforcement. And so law enforcement takes responsibility for them like they would any other deputy or marshal under the office of the sheriff.
So they have a sworn officer?
Yes, they would be. Correct.
The fact that you guys, the legislature is doing its own news conference and the governor just spoke, is that a indication that there are differences between your plans, or just scheduling, or why didn't you all do this together?
I believe it to be more of the latter. The conversations that I know we've had on the Senate side with the governor's office and his staff have incorporated, frankly, pretty much on all fours, the issues that we want to address. I think it's just a question of working out the details.
On the issue of
$500 million.
Bottom line is?
$500 million.
$500 million, I'm sorry, $500 million.
$500 million is what the governor put out there. The House and Senate are very close to that number, and we're still working through the final. But we will not hold back, and I don't want to speak for the House in terms of making sure every one of these components is adequately funded, but it will be around $400 million at least.
So the governor said that, to pay for this, if you have to give up tax cuts, that's fine with him. Does that mean no tax cuts this year?
And I would defer to the budget process and budget chairs on that. We have still a lot of work to do budget-wise.
We're going to do whatever it takes to get this done. And
if you can impose,
our numbers are very similar. We're all in the ballpark of $400 to $500 billion, and there's an absolute commitment on everyone's part. I'll say it 1,000 times. Our slogan is never again. When we met with the students, when we were down in Parkland, when we were at the school the day after the shooting, the one phrase that we've heard from every student is never again. And so whether it's money, whether it's the policy, our one single objective is never again, and I think we're going to get there.
If you can impose some kind of new restrictions on weapons purchases in the state, which you are proposing, why do you not look at something like magazine capacity? Why is that a off-limits topic right now?
Our goal was never again, and we think we've gotten to a process where it's never again. That we do not believe that was the issue. The issue was a myriad of breakdowns by government. The issue was that we have nonsensical policies that don't allow multiple sworn law enforcement officers to be in our schools protecting our children. The breakdowns were not giving law enforcement tools to go in there and grab somebody that was known by everybody but the government apparently as a mental threat to society, and not being able to grab that person and hold him and take away his guns. All of those things are part of the package that ultimately get us to never again.
You guys took an internal GOP poll that basically said that a majority of Floridians polled.
We don't do policy by polling. I'm not doing policy by polling.
No, I'm not. Your policy was done, and then you did a poll to say, how did it do? And the majority of people said they supported an assault weapons ban. Why should you be pursuing something that the majority of the public says you should go farther?
What we pursue, what we go after, when we sat in these meetings, I don't care if it was with the Democrats, whether it was the Senate colleagues, whether it was the House colleagues, we sat down and we said, how do we craft a policy? No limits on policy, no limits on money. How do we craft a policy that says this will never happen again? If there's polls out there, I can assure you that every single person standing up here, not one of us did one, or read one, or care about them. What we care about is having it never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.